What's up, everyone? How's it going,
Hello.
Ian? How you doing?
Good. How are you, Ellie? How's it
I'm
going? Happy
good.
New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Oh, yeah, it's our first stream of 2026. I keep forgetting the year that we're in now. It's going
I
so
know.
quickly.
That always
Hey
happens
to
with me.
everyone
It's like you
in.
just, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're good. See, this is what happens when it's been so long since we've done a stream.
Dust the rust off.
Yeah,
Live.
you got a little bit rusty. I was just saying hey to everyone in the chat. So everyone's looking forward to some ZBrush learning, and absolutely me too. Hey to 2 Pixels, Dash on with Sharon, how's it going? Thanks for joining us live, as always. So we've got some fun stuff for you basically today and next Wednesday. I'm just going to add my screen in so you can see the nice the things that we're going to be creating over this 2-part series. Basically, me and Ian had a bit of a chat, and we don't always stream together, and we thought, hey, how can we find a fun way of uniting, the Maxon tools whilst also creating some pretty cool stuff? And we came up with this idea of creating product visuals. So designing product assets in ZBrush and then taking them into Cinema 4D, doing some fun, MoGraph tips and tricks, and then of course creating some lovely Redshift renders with that. And yeah, this is basically the idea. So we're going to be doing this today and next Wednesday. And the whole part of today is you, Ian, really, isn't it? So
Yeah.
what are we going to be doing today?
Yeah. So like you said, Ellie and I have been chatting, and we're like, yeah, this is actually a very commonly asked workflow between ZBrush and Redshift. We get a lot of those questions, not just obviously online, but also when we're at events and shows and stuff like that. A lot of people are very curious as to how to move the product in. And so we have a lot of really good little tips and tricks for that, but also too, we just thought this could be like a normal thing that we're going to do throughout the year. So we're actually also talking about possibly doing another stream for like jewelry and stuff. So if you guys like that, comment in the chat like if you'd like to see that workflow, because making like rings or pendants and stuff inside of ZBrush and then making them look super beautiful inside of Redshift is obviously something that we are also contemplating. So let us know if that's good. But yeah, so we're going to be making this asset today. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to make the bottle, and then we're also going to make the little shoes. And what's cool about Cinema 4D is the fact that we obviously get the ability to clone stuff. So I don't have to make 1,500 of these things, right? Ellie can decide how many she needs, and that's going to be super cool. So we're going to be making the bottle and, of course, the shoes today. And I will say, because it's the first stream of 2026, feel free to ask questions and stuff like that. I tend to approach things as simple as possible. I try not to get it super complicated. So even if you're brand new, or even if you're advanced into ZBrush, we're going to go over some stuff that everybody can hopefully learn something from today. And if you guys have any questions or even other thoughts on the matter, please comment as we're going through. Ellie will interrupt me. She'll just dead stop and be like, hey, we're going to answer this question. So do not
absolutely.
be afraid
It's
to
my
chat.
favorite thing to do.
Yeah, and I approve. I consent, so we're good. So, and would definitely love to see a jewelry one. Absolutely. So yeah, so we're going to be talking more about that for sure. So hey, what's up, Al? How you doing? Oh, also Al votes for jewelry, which is sick.
Got some good votes for jewelry. This is good, actually. I feel like the more feedback we can get on what people want to see, then we could definitely do it. Like I already have a list of things that I want to do this year that, people have said on socials or on like emails and stuff like that.
Exactly. So just a reminder, this is a part 1. So today is ZBrush only. Next Wednesday, same time, same bat channel, we're going to be doing the Redshift next week with Ellie, and I will be there to interrupt Ellie. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and slide on over to my ZBrushie and show the main project, and then we're going to start building it from scratch. So let me know when I'm ready to go.
Cool. I just removed mine. Also, one quick thing, there is actually project files. So we're streaming on the Maxon training team, the normal Maxon channel, and also the Maxon ZBrush channel. And in the link to this video, there is actually a project files link, which includes the ZBrush project file, and it actually includes the full Cinema 4D one that gives you that final render. So yeah, feel free to grab those, mess around with them, and yeah, follow along.
Yep. Okie dokie, artichoke. Let's get into it. So, can you guys see my screen okay?
Yes, we can.
Sweet. So here is the assets as built. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. So we're going to take a look at our subtool count. So you can see here, I actually have about 5 different, or 6, 5 or 6. Yeah, 5 that are functional. Let's not talk about this little guy right here. This little guy is just a name placeholder. So we have 5 main assets that we're working with. If I come down here and hit solo, you can see here's the bottle itself. And one of the things I'm going to call immediately while I'm showing the bottle is look how empty this bottle is. This is literally single-sided geometry. And we'll get into, as I build this, why this is single-sided geometry. So stay for that. But we kept it single-sided geometry in order to get the kind of look we were going for. And then, of course, we have 2 parts of the lid. So trying to keep things relatively simple and easy enough to do. And then, of course, we have the inside of a lid plus some of our gummies. And what's cool about the gummies is, of course, that they have our little logos on it. So we're going to talk about all this stuff. And actually, we're going to get into making the gummy asset first. We're just going to get that out of the way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to the left-hand side and hit Shift-S. And that's going to go ahead and just kind of dock that there so we all can see the final project. And I'm going to come up to Simple Brush, and I'm going to go ahead and say Switch. And that's going to leave this here. And what I'm going to do is actually click on the tool, the S tool here. So for a lot of you who don't know, this is actually the beginning of 2.5D, which is one of the main functions of ZBrush, was depth painting with depth, or 2.5D. So this tool is actually a representation of that, which is why we have not only a quick pick menu and a 3D mesh, but we also have brushes. One day we'll get into some 2.5D stuff because while it's old, it's super cool and I love it. But today we're just going to go ahead and pick a cylinder and drag this out. And actually, I'm actually going to need to, well, let's hit edit for a second. So here's a shape. Now I picked the cylinder. I'm going to go ahead and actually change this up just a little bit because I was playing around ahead of time. So let's switch. Let's pick this one here and let's go to this cylinder here, drag this out and hit 3D. And the reason why it was actually in the shape that I wanted to is because we're going to be talking about initializing. So when you first drag out a mesh like I have here, and I have my poly group on by hitting Shift F for polygroup, or you could just, I'm sorry, polyframe, or you could just click the polyframe button, which is right down here if you're on the default menu. With the polyframe here, you can see that the polygroups are actually white, but this is what we call the initial state or the initializing state of any object that you draw out on your screen. And the primitives that ZBrush ships with actually has a cool little hidden feature. So before I start sculpting on it, because if I try to start sculpting on it, it's going to tell me, no, you can't do that. If you want to sculpt on it, please convert it to a 3D primitive. But we don't want to do that yet, because what we want to do is actually get our hexagon shape out the gate. So how do you do that? Well, first things first, if I open up my subtool menu, you can see I just have my num subtool. But if we close that and come down to the bottom, we're going to be picking the initialize state right here. And this is going to open up a fun little menu. And the reason why we have the polyframe open is because we can manipulate this. We can actually adjust the X, Y, and Z axis of this, like this. We can actually come through and make the shape that we want. So if we're going for hexagon, the H divide, if we hit 6 and click on that, there you go. That's already the shape that I'm looking for, which is neat. So I don't have to try to model this from scratch or come up with some sort of alpha and make this design. I can just initialize this shape to get what I want. I also have what's called V divide, which will allow me to, if we come here and just zoom in, while I do V divide, it's actually going to be dividing there on this axis, and that's going to tell me how many edge loops I would like to support the shape. I can also taper this, which we're not going to in this case because it's pretty simple. It's, you know, the gummy itself needs to be, you know, the same thickness for the most part. But the cool part here is actually the cap sub ratio. Now, what this does is this cap ratio actually divides where your edge loops go to support your shape. And it does that between the caps and the actual middle of the mesh itself. So if I were to start moving this slider over, you can actually see that now I'm getting less edge loops on the side and more on the caps. And of course, it's functional on the bottom and on the top. Well, what's fun about this number is I want you to think of this number as a percentage. So for example, if I want 50% support of edge loops between the top, bottom, and the sides, I'm just going to type in 50. And that's going to do its best to kind of go in there. And then from here, I'm just going to actually increase it to something a little bit more favoring the cap, because that is actually going to be where most of the detail is going to reside. So I'm going to say something more like 90%, which will give me a few edge loops here on the sides, and then most of it on the top and bottom. And once we're done with this initialized shape, we can actually just come up here and then say make polymesh 3D. And then if I were to switch this out, so if I move this over and switch out like I had done before, when I come up here to the cylinder here, you can see it's already in that top pick. So it's ready for me to come in and start working. So if you're initializing at any point in time, then you switch back to that mode, that is what's going to happen. And this is a really fun step because now we're already, like, in my opinion, halfway through what we need in order to make this the gummy shape that we're going for. So from here, we're just going to hit W for the gizmo, and we're just going to kind of squash that down a little bit to a size that makes sense for us. And then we're just going to go ahead and rotate this about 90 degrees, just because personal preference. I like looking at things front facing, because the X, Y, and Z axis with the front face, X being screen left to screen right, Y being up and down, and Z being Z depth, just how I like to work. So whatever is functional for you, choose that angle. But from here, we're just going to rotate that way. And now we have this guy right here. Now, from here, really what we want to do is kind of see what it looks like when we divide our model in any way. So if I were to start dividing now, of course, it's going to give us a nice rounded, object, which can be pretty cool if that's what you're looking for. That's not quite what I'm looking for. I really want to hold on to that hexagonal shape. So instead of doing that, we're going to go ahead and close geometry. We're going to scroll down to the bottom till we get to PolyGroups. And then now what we're going to do is, because we have a plane change almost every, I don't know, like 20-degree angle maybe. I'm not a math wizard, so please don't fire me if that's wrong. But if we hit groups by normals, you can see here that group by normals, every plane change is going to give you a different poly group, and on the top and the bottom. And this is good because what we want to do is utilize this to our advantage to hold this shape as much as possible. And the way we can do that, you guessed it, it's creasing. So if we go to geometry, come up here to crease, we can actually choose to go ahead and look at this option called Crease by PolyGroups. We also have a little joke here in the office, which is my counterpart, Paul Gabry, also PG. So a lot of people back in the day would be like, oh, Crease by Paul Gabry's, because he uses this feature all the time. And this is one of the features I love so much. So if we click this guy, then we can see here now that we actually have some creasing that is happening. Now, any questions so far? I tend to just we have an hour, but I could dump so much information. So I want to make sure there's no questions.
No, you're good. So there was actually two just as we were getting started. So the first is, how do I avoid DynaMesh creating holes on my mesh, or what could I be doing incorrectly when DynaMeshing causing those holes?
That's such a great question and worth the tangent. I'll tell you what, let me finish up this one little bit with the gummy part before we move on to the next step of the gummy. So we'll talk about the creasing, and then I'm going to show you exactly how to avoid that. So real quick, just to finish this thought here, one of the things that is fun about having creases is if I start dividing with a crease on it, right, you're going to notice here. So I'm going to divide. And look, nothing is happening to the edges. It's nice and sharp. But the problem with that is that's not how gummies look. They're not super tack sharp. They're not edges on a blade or something like that. So instead, what we want to do is go to the crease level, and we want to decide how many levels of subdivision we support the crease before it starts rounding. And in this case, I'm actually going to pick a kind of extreme number. Right now, it's defaulted to 15 at a 45-degree angle, which is totally fine. And I like this 45-degree angle. That's not going to be too much of a problem. But if I were to lower this down to, let's say, crease level 2 and start dividing, by crease level 3, it's now going to start really rounding those edges out. And I don't want that either. That's a little too drastic for me. So instead, we're going to pick something like 5. And then when I start dividing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, by the 6th level, now we're going to start getting just a little bit of that roundness. And if that's still too sharp for my liking, we just back it up, Control Z, go to maybe crease level 4 and start dividing a little bit. And after we divide at least 4 times, now it's going to start rounding, and that looks to be a lot better. And so that's how we can maintain the shape, but still get some roundness to it and make it look nice. Now, let's pivot to the question about DynaMesh, because that's super important. And I love breaking things live so you guys can understand what's happening. So here, what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and let's pick a plane here. Whee! Awesome blossom sauce. Actually, let's just switch this. We're going to clear this out. I'm going to hit Control N to clear everything. And I'm just going to go ahead and pick a plane 3D, hit Edit, and make Polymesh 3D. So now we have this. Okay. So the thing with DynaMesh, it's all about thickness. So if I were to give some sort of thickness here, let's pull the ZModeler brush, so B for brush, Z for ZModeler, and then M. And if I hover over any type of face, edge loop, or point and hit the space bar, I get a nice little menu. And here we're just going to Q mesh and we're going to polygroup all, because we just want to affect all the polygroups right now. And I'm going to pull this out. So if I have a nice thickness here, say something like this, right? And I'm sculpting on it. Yee, sculpting, awesome, life is good. Then I go ahead and I DynaMesh this. So let's come over here to geometry. Let's go to DynaMesh, and I'm just going to hit DynaMesh. Then you're going to see here that everything is so far fine. But what if on the circumstance that it's too thin? So I'm going to go something like, whoop, that's too thick. Let's come over here, say something like this. Okay, great. Maybe this will work. I'm going to come in and start sculpting this. Yeah, it's affecting the backside. Hit DynaMesh, boom, I got holes. This is actually what is happening, is the area between the internal and the external meshes. There's not enough information for DynaMesh to actually keep the holes closed here. So it becomes too thin. And when that happens, now you're actually running into that kind of like Swiss cheese effect that is occurring. Also, what could be, so a way to avoid that first is to just give it enough thickness. Make sure that it has enough thickness to do so. The other thing you could do is go up to brush. Let's just dock this on the left-hand side. And you could just do that by grabbing this little indicator here, just dragging or dropping it. Or what you could do is, some of these are defaulted to which side it will fly. So if I open up the brush menu and just tap one time, okay, now it's not going to do it because it's yelling at me. But anyway, if you come over here, okay, fine. Anyway, I tapped in. That's why I went over there so fast. Now it doesn't want to do it, but it's fine. That's what we do when we demo. It happens. Anyway, what you do is you go into the brush and you go under auto masking and you turn on backface mask. And what that will do is, now that I'm sculpting, and I'm going to sculpt really aggressively for this demo, if I flip on the backside, you can see nothing is happening to that other side of that mesh. So if you need the geometry to be thin, like let's say it's a cape, but you need to add some sculptural detailing to it, turning on backface mask will prevent that. And if I have this off and I turn over, you see now it's eating away at that. And anytime you're sculpting on a double-sided mesh and is really thin, what you're doing is you're pushing those vertices closer together, and you can't control that thickness. So that is definitely something that's going to cause that Swiss cheese. So if I DynaMesh that now, notice this side is fine, but here we go. Now we have some holes here, and it's just not really able to make this watertight. So that's one way you can avoid it. Another way you could avoid holes by using thin meshes would be to just use the thickness, subdivide thickness modifier. So instead of having double-sided geometry, especially for like clothing and stuff, come here to dynamic subdiv and turn on dynamic. And then from here, increase the thickness. So even if it's really thin, like it is here, I won't have backface turned on, but I can sculpt on this. And even though it's going to affect the underside, because this is just a projection, the thickness is going to maintain throughout the entire shape. So if I were to just go ahead and grab the move brush, come here to the side and like pull this, no matter how I pull that thickness is always going to be the exact same, and it's going to maintain that throughout the design. So it won't matter. And then once I'm done, I can hit apply. And then if I needed to go into DynaMesh, I absolutely could. What you could also do, so I'm just throwing everything at you, I'm so sorry, is you could actually use the picker to make sure that you're DynaMeshing at the right resolution, or you're getting the right starter resolution. The resolution base here is an arbitrary number based on the size of the object within the viewport. So meaning it doesn't really matter what this number is, as long as the size of this is in relation to this number, it will DynaMesh relatively well. So what you could do is just click and hold your pen or your left mouse button over the picker and drag and find a spot that actually ensures that it's the right resolution. Because if it's too low, right, then it actually might try to weld 2 points together that don't exist, creating a hole. But in this case here, we can find the densest part of the mesh, which thankfully this is pretty uniform. And then I can increase a little bit based off of that and turn that on. And now that's going to give me a really nice DynaMesh resolution that fits the size and the placement of the model on the sculpt itself. So there are a few ways to do that. When in doubt, of course, what you can do is you can actually like look at your meshes, the mesh integrity of this. So sometimes what I would do is, let's say I do have that hole. And so I would actually take that hole. Let's go back to where we created a hole. So let's do this. So I'm just going to open this up. I'm going to come in and make that super thin. I'm now going to go ahead and sculpt on it super aggressively. I'm going to turn on DynaMesh. Boom, I have some cheese grating effect. Now, this is obviously an extreme case. What I can do next is I can actually fix this by going to inflate, right? And trying to like make these holes kind of collide into each other. This is like last resort, by the way. If you set yourself up for success in the beginning with the mesh, then you'll actually do yourself some pretty good justice. But in this case, let's say we have something, we don't want to spend a couple hours to remake something because that's just too much time. I need to fix this hole now. So I can come in with some inflation and really blow that up. And then I can re-DynaMesh that and take a look. Okay, this needs some more resolution. Come in, re-DynaMesh. Okay, that's looking pretty good. There's still some holes. So I'll need to come in and kind of clean this up. Of course, you want to make sure that you're doing this in a way that makes sense. This is obviously just a blob, but it's the same principle. So here I can say like, okay, yeah, that's looking pretty good. Now what you can do is come on down to the geometry tab to mesh integrity, and you can check the mesh integrity. And here you'll notice it's actually yelling at me, respectfully, of course. It's saying like, look, you have 235 edges that are shared by 2 or more polygons, meaning your mesh is just colliding like it's an explosion waiting to happen. So then we can go ahead and say, well, let's fix the mesh integrity. And when we do that, now if I check it, okay, it should be pretty good. If I DynaMesh it, okay, we have a little bit of errors here, but nothing that can't be solvable, but it gets you closer to your next step. And then from there, you can come in and just keep working on it and filling it in. So really check for those. Hopefully that helped out. But yeah, it's sometimes you can get into the weeds of this, and a lot of times it's just a thickness thing. You can also just turn on the gizmo, press and hold Control, and kind of inflate that as much as possible. This is really gross. I'm going crazy now. And in doing so, re-DynaMeshing that, and then coming through, inflating some of these holes. Like, so you can see how out of hand this can get. So if you pay attention to those moments where the thickness and the back face mask is helpful, then you'll prevent yourself needing to come in and now do this where you're like trying to fix it all and trying to make sure that it's working out as much as possible. So hopefully that was helpful, but that's a lot of what might be happening, at least every case scenario that I've come across.
That's such a good answer. I'm going to need to like up my answering next Wednesday because you've clearly set the bar there of giving 3 different answers to a question.
I mean, you mean I just rant forever? Yep, absolutely.
Every possible outcome, it should now be covered.
Yeah.
There was actually another quick question on
Sure.
When you were doing the creasing or the beveling of those edges. Mm-hmm. We did get asked, could you like chamfer the edges, or is that pinching by spear chuck?
Yeah, you can chamfer. You can chamfer the edges. Absolutely. However you would like to do it, you absolutely can. We do have there's a couple ways you can do that. For example, one of the ways that you could do it, and actually it's one of my favorite ways of doing it because it's the most controlled, is, so we have our shape here. We come here to PolyGroups and we say group by normals. And then I actually haven't used this plugin in a while bit, but it's really cool. So it's called Bevel Pro. So if I have PolyGroups here, I can actually just come in here, go to Bevel Pro, and then come in. And if you give it a second, boop, 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 there you go. You can see here, I have my shape right where I want it. And you see all the red that's happening on my screen? That is actually the chamfering happening. And I can actually say how much I want to bevel this. So let me just pull this up to an extreme number, say something like that. That looks pretty cool. And then I can actually choose between a chamfer or a bevel, so a more rounded corner or a more sharp corner. And then from here, I can also open up the advanced tab and I can adjust any type of like which inner parts or what smooth connection happens. But at the end of the day, you can do it this way, which is really fun. You can also change the display colors if you want. I find that these are pretty nice. If I choose preview edges, it's just going to go ahead and kind of show me what it's looking like, which is kind of cool. I can do that. And then once I'm all said and done with this, obviously I can come up here to the top and save and load this if I really like everything. I can also choose this to auto apply, so I really know what I'm getting. And once I'm done with this, I can come down here to the bottom and say okay, and it's going to turn on live Boolean. And what it's going to do is actually give me a cage just like this. And that's going to go ahead and allow me to control this bevel as easy as possible. And so from here, I could put these in a folder. We'll just keep it unnamed for now. Name your stuff, but for the sake of demo, we can just skip that part. Come in here, and now I can come in and say Boolean the folder. And once that's done, there you go. Now I have this guy right here. But one of the things to notice is that when you Boolean anything, it's going to go ahead and kind of stitch it as much as possible. But for what you're going for, like I wasn't really too concerned with super clean topology. I was concerned with it being usable topology because we're not going to animate this project. We're actually just going to be using some cloners and then getting a really nice still image. And the most animation isn't going to be deformation as much as it's going to be movement. So in talking about that, I wasn't too concerned about topology, but here in this case, of course, you always want to make it as clean as possible. But this is one way that you can do it. And then you could just ZRemesh at the end of it if you would like, or retopo it with a new retopo brush. So yeah, that's absolutely how you can do that. Something else too that you could do, trying to think of where was that? Where did I put that project? There it is. Is it here? Now I have too many things open. It's all good. Oh, there we go. Okay, here's the original. Perfect. So yeah, the other way that you could do it, actually, I'm just going to go ahead and Control-Shift-D duplicate this for the sake of time. So instead of using the creases, which by the way, the creases are, in my opinion, one of the most controlled ways of doing it to giving you results that you would like. But you can also too come in here and grab a bevel flat or a bevel arc brush, which is a sculptural brush. And the way to use this is to actually just click one point, drag over to the other, however big that you want that, and then come in here and you can actually start rounding that corner. And what's cool is you can actually do this, of course, with radial symmetry. So you come up here to transform and go into activate symmetry. And then, of course, we're going to see z-axis at, we got 6 points here. So we're going to want, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 6 points. Okay, great. So we're going to want to come in. And then from here, we can actually go ahead and start beveling that and having that work as much. You want your tool to be centered as much as possible. This may not be centered, but you can do it that way. Why I didn't choose that is because look how low my resolution is. I don't have a lot of resolution here. And so because of that, I actually avoided doing that because I figured I can get better results quickly with just the crease option because of how low res this is actually. So there's a few ways you could do it. Yeah, great question. I love it. Very cool. So let's go ahead and finish this gummy off. So real quick, what we could do is notice too in this, I actually don't have all the resolution that I want. So I'm going to come over here and I'm actually going to add some more resolution before I subdivide, because this is a big gap between these 2 points. Even though that it's, of course, creased and it's going to hold its shape, but this part right here is actually quite a big gap as far as edge loops go. And I like to keep things as even as possible. So I'm going to use the ZModeler brush. So one more time, that's B for brush, Z for ZModeler, and M. Hover over an edge, and we would say insert multiple edge loops. And we're going to keep our PolyGroups this time. And we're going to come through and add in a little bit more resolution to that. And if you are using creased edges, you might get these edges that end up getting creased like that. That's okay, because you can just quickly undo them all and then do the crease by PolyGroups if you so desire. And then from here, like I said, we're just going to go ahead and divide a few times, get something like that. Okay, great. I'm looking for a resolution at this point. So this is basically 2 million, and that's okay. Now, what we are going to be doing here, by the way, is I am going to be not keeping this topology the way it is. I'm actually going to move into DynaMesh only because of the next step that I want. I want to ensure that there's enough even topology to capture the logo. Pardon me. The logo inside is super important, and we wanted that to be sculptural. We didn't want that to be a displacement. So I actually decided that it was best to just go ahead and just get enough resolution to hit delete, and then have something that's super dense, because ZBrush is vertex based, right? And because it's vertex based, what we want to do is we need to pull up a mask. So if we press and hold Control and have the mask pen, we want a nice, sharp, clean mask. That's what we're going for. But we need the logo. Now I did this off screen, but what I did was if we go into Alpha and say import, there we go. I actually went ahead and grabbed our logo, which we have a bunch of them, and moved it into Photoshop and generated a logo. So here we got the ZBrush one. And I'm going to go ahead and turn that off for the ZModeler, but let's turn it on for the mask. So let's just grab the ZBrush logo, and we're going to change this to drag rect. And from here, we're just going to go ahead and find the center as much as we can, press and hold Control, and drag this out and get a very blurry image. Why is that happening? Why are you doing what you're doing? Yes. Okay, cool.
Because we're live.
Because we are live.
We're
yes.
live. It always goes wrong live.
It does. What's happening here? What is happening here?
I like that logo better.
You like that logo better?
That's nice. Yeah.
What is happening? Why are we blurry here? I promise this worked. Okay, what happened here? All right, troubleshoot time. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and come in here. Let's subdivide a few times. Boom. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and restart ZBrush, because that actually may be a bug, not a feature. So yes, that is awesome. Always love when that happens. So when in doubt, well, save your work. Well, I already have this saved. Let's go ahead and restart that, because that was a little weird. Apologies, chat. It happens to the best of us.
At least everybody knows that these things happen to us.
Yeah.
Even to the greats like Ian. He has these issues.
Don't call me great. I'm just a guy. I'm just a dude playing another dude. Okay, let's pull a sphere up just to show you what I was going for, because I'm a little confused on what happened. That's okay. We'll research that afterwards, and my buddy Paul's going to hear about it. But if I have my logo and I go ahead and drag this out, you can see here that I'm actually getting my alpha, right? But you notice how it's actually having a nice fall off. Now I could tell that this is actually working as intended, so I might have just hit a little bit of a bug, but this isn't the quite shape I want. I actually want a nice solid shape. So if I am holding the Control option and I go to focal shift here at the top, so if we come up here to the top, focal shift, and I drag this to -100, now when I press and hold the Control and drag it out, you can see here, it's a nice clean shape. And that's what we are going for. So of course, if I come back to my project, let's just load that up. There we go. And come on in. So let's just work on the backside of the Gummy to save time, because we are live for like an hour, but we're going to be covering a bunch of stuff. Let's see. Maybe it's my image. Maybe my image is just.
Does the resolution of the image matter by any chance?
So we only support 16-bit alpha at this point, and this resolution is actually quite nice. Yeah, the better the resolution, it is going to give a better result, but ultimately at the end of the day, the the resolution of the mesh is what is going to give you the best result, because it needs to capture in the vertices, just like any other of the sculpting side. So if I were to now, quote, drag this out here, let's just come in. Let's just DynaMesh this for the sake of it. There we go, nice controlled thickness. Yes, there we go. See, so now I drag this out. So I find the center as much as possible, and then I drag this to something that I'm looking for. Now, of course, it's going to mask the backside of this gummy as well, and that is not what we want. So in order to, quote, fix that, what we need to do is just make sure that we mask off the other side. So if I were to use the mask pen and just turn off the alpha for a second, I can actually come in, drag out the mask option by pressing and holding Control and dragging an empty space. And then I can let go of the command as long as I'm still dragging, press and hold Option, and this will actually do Option or Alt if you're on PC, and that will actually give you the opposite. So that will deselect that mask there, keeping that mask here. And if I Control Tap, that's going to flip that. And now everything is masked off except for the area that I wanted. And the way I wanted to do this was, of course, we have this DynaMesh at the moment. So I went ahead and I pulled this down just to give us a little bit of depth. There we go. And then that actually looks pretty nice to me. And you can see just how, like, yeah, we're getting a little bit of stretching, but that's okay, because I'm going to clear the mask by Control swiping and then do it one more time to DynaMesh. And here now we have a nice clean logo shape. And what I had done is actually took the smooth brush, because it's so dense, and I just came through and gave it a little bit of a light smooth. And that's actually why I like working dense with dense objects sometimes, is because I can just come in and actually just aggressively smoothen some of the shapes out and give me exactly what we are looking for. So this looks nice and clean like such. There we go. Perfect. And this would be our logo. And if we just ignore the Redshift logo in the back on this one, yeah, let's actually do this. We can actually just have some fun with this. And we can actually go to, here's something that's really cool, actually. We can go to clip curve, and we can actually just go ahead and just kind of clip that if we needed to, so we could just see the one ZBrush. If you do want the ZBrush logo on both sides, of course, what you can do is you can actually, instead of like trying to do everything all at once, just turn this around, right? And then put this gizmo somewhere in the center of where you want that to be. And then from here, what we can do is we can actually go to Geometry, Modify Topology, and here we have a Mirror and Weld. But Mirror and Weld has these tiny little buttons called X, Y, and Z. And we can actually turn off X, go on the Z axis, hit Mirror and Weld. And of course, it's a little off center. So let's pull that in just a bit. Do that one more time. And now look, you have the logo on both sides, except for, oh, that is the other way. I'm doing great, chat. But anyway, actually what you could do, here's what you can do. We can go ahead and Control drag, and we can duplicate it like this. Yes, do this instead, because we're going to DynaMesh it. DynaMesh, boom. Now we're good. Now we have it. Now we have it. There you go. So you could do that instead, which would be really cool. Cool. Hopefully I didn't lose anybody on that, but that is one way to do it. And just a quick little bonus of stuff and things. If you guys don't know, I'll show you a little cool tip. If nope, not Control. There we go. A little cool tip, a little hidden menu, so to speak, is anytime you're doing clip curve, or you're doing the slice curve, or even the knife curve, if you press Control and Shift together, and then you press the space bar, you get this little menu right here, which is a nice little menu for splitting things to parts, B radius, or unclipping things if you clipped it, or PolyGroups. And what the B radius will do, which is really fun, is if I come in through here and I go to cut things like such, I can actually cut the size of the focal shift itself. So if I go to cut this normally on the shadow side, it would cut just the other half as I did. But by pressing and holding Option, instead, it's actually going to remove a segment of that. So just a little quick tip on that too. If you're cutting things, this could be a really cool feature, right? Just come in, hold Option, do that. Or what you can do is you can come in here, finger Jenga, go split the parts instead. And then what you could do with this is, as you cut something, now it's going to split into a separate part, which was really, really cool. So instead of flipping that around with the control Z part that I did, I could easily split that off instead. So I could do something like this. I could split this part here and actually, give myself like an ooey gooey, maybe a little bit of a bigger section here like this, giving me this design. And then I can flip the mask, control drag duplicate, then turn this around like this, come in, and then I can control drag because I'm in DynaMesh mode, right? I just weld those things together. And now I even have a more complicated shape. Really, really simple, easy to do. So however you want your gummies to look, this is absolutely how you can do that. Sweet.
This is cool. We had another question actually. When you were talking about masking, let me just throw it up on screen for everyone else. Wondering, is there a way to use a mask without affecting the face behind it? I often use the lasso mode to create masks instead of dotting to fill them in, which puts me at a disadvantage.
That's a great question. So I'm going to real quick, let me just make sure. So yes, you should be able to, absolutely. And so the way that I'm thinking about that actually has to do with backface mask. So I'm going to double check though, because this might have been a conversation that had come up at one point. So if I'm doing the drag mask here, and then I come in and do backface mask is per your brush. So if I were to do this now, it absolutely will protect you from that. So yeah, I could have just come in here, turn on backface mask, find the center, Ian, you could do it. Yes, there you go. And then that's going to protect that side. So that is something that you could do. Just press and hold control, go up to brush, backface mask, and it's good. Something else you could do as well, and it is a little bit of a new feature as of 2023.5, I think, is actually, if you're let's actually just remove this for a second. It's actually called mask by region. So let's say we do have our logo. Boom. That's a funky logo. But let's say I have our logo here. What you could end up doing as well is instead of painting everything in like this, because that's tedious, you can actually come over here to masking, come on down to the bottom until you see mask by region. And if you do auto region, it'll automatically fill in things that you want. But if you control Z that and actually do analyze region, now I could come in and say, you know what? That little dot right there, fill that. This little dot right here, fill that instead. And now I'm left with this shape here. So those are other ways that you could do it. So when I actually, for, let's say in this case, I didn't turn off backface mask. So let's come in here. Let's turn that off. Let's come back in, grab the drag rec, grab our logo, find the center as much as possible. Cool. I'm going to go ahead and flip that. You can see here now it's like, oh, God, okay, I made a mistake. Instead of doing the drag method, come in here and analyze the region, and then come in and then what you want to do. So analyze this, fill this little dot in, say fill, and boom, I'm left with that. So I could have done that solution as well.
Very cool.
There you go. Cool. Okay, this was meant to be an hour. We might go a little bit over, Ellie. Just saying, hang in there.
I'm shocked. For the first time ever.
I know, right? Yeah, it's so good. By the way, that was a great question. I love it. All great questions. So absolutely digging it. Where are we at, here? Okay, so let's get to the jar for a second, because I could talk about gummies all day long, but we're going to show the jar itself. So the jar itself was actually built really, really simple, but I used the same steps I did for the gummy. If we isolate the jar itself, notice that I have threads as well as, or I have a thread, it's just one. And then I have the main jar itself. Well, the thread itself is actually done with initializing as well. So if we make a quick jar, so I'm going to kind of speed through this because we do have some other tutorials that are based on how to use ZModeler to create objects and stuff. So if I were to come in here, go to geometry, and then let's go to edge loop. And one of my favorite features is delete loops, because that deletes all of the unnecessary loops and gives me the main shape. And if I were to mask this section off and flip it and just coming down here and get to a decent size, let's actually make it a little bit taller. And then actually here, this is the coolest thing. I love this. So here, if I press and hold control, I can actually go ahead and drag this out, and I can move this in, and I can drag this out like this. Control drag again, can really inflate this a little bit and drag this down. And then from here, come through, boom, 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 boom. Come in, drag. Okay, that's where our threads would quote go, right? And then we'll cap it. Okay, great. So we have our base shape just like that. Now I want some similar tapering and stuff like that. If we take a look at the other jar that we have, so if I'm going to come in here and take a look at this guy, let's just stamp it here. There it is. You can see here I have some steps and stuff like that. So little things is if you're in the middle of building something, so like this jar is too tall for me. So let's squish that down so we get something similar. There we go. But notice that my chamfering is a little inconsistent. That's okay. I can actually come in and actually clean some of this up. So I can just mask off this section like that a little bit, invert that by control tapping, and then I could just move that up however I would like to. If I turn on my wireframe, we can see that I have something like this. And then I'm going to use the ZModeler brush, hover over this edge, insert multiple edge loops with interactive elevation and keeping the groups, because I do want this to kind of round. If you don't know about interactive elevation, it allows me to actually round off areas and add or subtract edge loops to get the shape that I'm looking for. So say something like that. And if I wanted to repeat that anywhere, all you need to do is just tap one time and it repeat that process. I don't want that there, that's okay. But what I do want is a couple edge loops without interactive elevation. I just want to go ahead and give this some topology, say something like that. And we'll give this some topology here. Now, another way to chamfer with the ZModeler brush is actually to press and hold Alt or Option and just tap an edge loop that you want to delete, and then you can do that. And then from here, interactive elevation. And if I come through and just drag that out, I can actually give me a nice rounded corner. So if I look at how soft that is, that falls off pretty nicely. And I'm just going to go ahead and give me just a few more loops just to support this really quickly. We're just going to do single-sided, and I'm just going to quickly throw some stuff. Of course, you're going to want to take your time and make sure that you have edge loops right where you want. This is a very old school way of doing it. I could do the creasing method, but I also wanted to show you that you can do it like this. So then if I go ahead and just subdivide, you can see it's those edge loops are now supporting those edges and allowing me to just kind of limit things as much as possible. Now, what we are going to do though is we will always rely on polygroups. I'm going to go ahead and just group by normal just so I know that that is there. And now that I have this shape, I'm pretty happy with this. So of course, now what I'm going to do is we're going to move to the next part is how I made the thread, which is actually pretty simple. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to save as because we've already had one little thing happen. We don't need to repeat history. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to go ahead and put this here like this. I'm going to Control N. I'm going to put this off to the side, and I'm going to go ahead and Control Shift stamp that. Okay. Now the reason why I'm going to stamp this is because I'm going to use this visual off to the side as a control to how big my threads should be. Okay. So if I move this off screen and then I go out of edit mode and switch, and the reason why I went off screen is because if I switch out of edit mode and move into the draw mode again for 2.5D, it's actually going to stamp the area of the very last of the subtools location. So what do I mean by that? Let's actually do this. Let's drag this out here. Let's come in and control this. So let's say I just move this here like this, turn on my poly frame, shift, and then I move this over, and then I get out of edit mode and I say switch. Now it stamps this here too. So now this is also here, and I don't want that in my way. So that's why I moved it off screen. I could have easily just come in here, drag this over, and then just say edit and then switch, and then it would have done that. So just a few ways you can do that. Sometimes my brain just does things, and that's how we work. So let's go to Simple Brush, and let's go into the tool. And now we're going to pick the Helix 3D, and we're going to drag this out. And you guessed it, we're going to go in edit mode, and we're going to use Initialize again to give us the threads that we want. And so from here, now I'm able to look at it from the top, right? So what I can do is come into Initialize, And this time, this object actually has a few different things than just the cylinder that we were originally working with. And you might notice there's some different graphs. So of course, I can work on any axis too, by the way. I can work on Y, X, or Z. I'm going to choose Y's and just manually move it down to C because that is how it's going to get imported. But you can position that, align that to any axis that you need to work on. And from here, what we're going to do, if we look at this on the side and come to the profile of the actual thickness and stuff, you can see here that we have some graphs. And you can see that I can adjust this and update this in real time and give this as much shape as I need to. So I can really have this kind of taper out like a really weird Christmas tree. Or I can drop things down and just start manipulating. But what I can also do is I can just drag these dots off and try to align them as close to straight as possible. There you go. And at any point in time too, if you make a mistake, just hit reset. Like if you're like, yeah, I didn't really want to do any of that, or you can even undo or redo. So you can come through and reset things as needed. But here, this is going to go ahead and work for me. And then the next thing is actually going to be the coverage itself. So how many rotations do I want? Or how many rotations do I don't want? And here, I only wanted a single thread. So I'm actually going to do something like this. And it looks funky, but that is okay. Because the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on the offset. So we're going to, how wide or thick something might be. So here, this is where this reference is going to come into play. Say something like that. That might be okay. And then, of course, too, we have our coverage, how round something is. So if I take a look at this, you can see we can adjust a lot of this. There we go. And so here, let's actually get a smaller thickness. And let's adjust this to be what we need. And I messed with the coverage. So I'm adjusting the radius of this and how this actually angles. And I just want a slight little taper to it. And then I'm going to do 1, see what that gives me. All right, it's almost there. So let's go 0.9. Yeah, maybe that's a little 0.95. Let's try that. Yeah, that's close enough for what we're looking for. There we go. So now we have this shape, and this is pretty close to what I may or may not want. But again, we can adjust as much as possible. I can drop the thickness and give me something that's close to what I want. So you have full control over all of this, which is really, really cool. The other thing too is now we're going to focus on the divide of things. So I can actually drop the divide resolution. And threads like this sometimes have a little bit of an edge to them. And so I'm actually going to drop this down again to be a bit of a hexagon. And also the dividing too, you can drop the resolution of that as much as you want. We'll say 6:7, 6:9, whatever works. There you go. That's fine. And so now if I go ahead and try to size this give me an idea of like, yeah, that might work out well to what I'm looking for. So we can now go up to the top here and say make polymesh 3D. And now it's that 3D shape. Now it's going to make its own 3D shape here. So what we're going to need to do is go back to our bottle. We can Control N, and we have our bottle here. And now we can go to our subtool, and we can insert. And now we have our new helix right here. And we can drag this up. And oh, look, that's not quite fitting. Okay, so it's a little bit too tall. So we can either make a decision to increase the size of our bottle. So we can just do this. We can mask this off, flip this over, and make this bigger for it to fit. Or what we can do, let's control that, let's clear it. Or what we can do is, of course, we can go back into our helix. So let's go ahead and edit out of this, Command N, clear that, come up here to here. And now we can pick that helix, drag that out, and just hit edit. And oh no, it's not going to do that. Hold on 1 second. So let's edit out of that. Let's try one more time. Let's come over here, grab this, come to our helix. Is it going to get, oh, it's not going to do that. Sorry, apologies. Hold on 1 second. We'll get it. Boop, boop, boop. Come over here. Yes. There it is. Drag that one there. Oh, it's going to do that. All right. Well, we can cheat it. We can readjust as we needed to. Why? I am. Watch me fiddle, guys. Yes, this is why you're here. I promise you.
This is my
There
favorite
it
part
is.
so far.
There we go. Yeah, there it is. Okay. No, it actually saves it right down here in a different canvas. And then we can just come and hit edit. There it is. One more time. So what did Ian just solve? Yes, it is 2026, guys, I promise. So here, as long as you don't get rid of this canvas here, I was coming in here to the simple brush and just trying to pick this. But every time I did it, I accepted that as a 3D mesh. And that's not what you want to do. You actually want to come in here to these little canvases and pick the one you were working on, then come into edit. And you can tell based on the poly group that it's white. So that's what you're looking for. So now I can come back in and I can adjust that that thickness or that radius as much as possible. So not that one, hit undo. This is your favorite part, by the way? Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
There we go.
No, I'm loving it all.
We all do a thing every now and then. Okay, there we go. Now we can do this, say make polymesh 3D. Actually, you know what? I'll call myself out. I love making mistakes. And sometimes my brain sometimes goes really hard really quickly, and it just sometimes needs to like slow down for 5 seconds.
No, do you know what? I
And
think seeing how you troubleshoot these things is the most real thing ever. Because like you said, you're in this all day, every day, and there are still some things that, you know, don't cross your minds. And like you've proven, there's like 4 ways to answer these different questions or this different kind of situation based on the outcome. So yeah, I think it's don't worry about doing these things. It's so great to see how someone who is as professional as you know, come up with a solution or an answer to a problem.
oh, well, I'm glad. Well, thank you. So yeah, so there we go. So now we got our thread. We just need to place it however we need to. I'm just going to place it like such there. And then, yeah, so then we have our thread. Now, I mentioned earlier, real quick, as we are hitting the hour mark, is that if we go back to our original project here and we take a look at this and we hit solo, I said I made this single-sided geometry, and there was a reason for that. So one is that I made the internal thread. So everything you just saw me do right now actually is how I also did the internal one. We'll get to making this real fast here in a second. But how I made these threads here is exactly how I ended up making these threads here. It was just really, really simple, easy to do. If you want to make sure that these threads actually match the current thread that you have, one of the things that I did was I actually came down to PolyGroups, group by normals. And then what I had done was I went ahead and used ZModeler. I came in here and I went to QMesh PolyGroups all, because now we have 2 different polygroups. And I actually came in and instead of just extruding it, if you press and hold Control, you're actually going to pull off that segment right there. So I made sure that it was floating above the mesh just enough. And the same thing here, I extruded this out. So I made sure that that was floating above or below the mesh as much as possible. And then I went ahead and hid those things, came into Subtool, split hidden. And now I have this portion here. And I just ended up giving it some thickness, just like this. And so now what you end up having, just turn everything off, is you have something that fits within itself. So it looks to be a little bit more functional. And that's how I approached coming through here. If we come into this, not that guy, come into this guy, and we come into the inside of this. That's actually how I ended up approaching this, to make it believable that it would, quote, slide off as much as possible. If you want that to be as realistic as possible, you'll want to try to run through and see where areas might get caught up. But we just needed it to be visually correct, not functionally correct. So we went ahead and did that. And then I ended up giving it some, basically entrapping that into a shell so we can do this as well. So if we wanted the lid to be the exact same size, let's come back in here. There we go. Let's turn on this guy right here. We're going to focus on this. So if we wanted the lid to be the same size, polygroups come into our favor. I'm going to go ahead and drag this off. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and press and hold Control and extrude that little bit off just like that. Yeah, just like that. And then we're going to split hidden. And then I can give this some thickness. Tap Alt or Option to give us a different poly group as we're extruding. There we go. And then if I come in and take a look at things, I just need to essentially shape it and make sure that it is correct. Now this part right here, I actually needed to extrude it out just a little bit and pop that into that segment, just like that, and make sure that that looks like that would fit. And if we come back in here, what I'm going to do, and actually what we could do, save ourselves some time, let's come in here, and I'm actually going to cap this. So before I do an extrusion, I'm going to hover over an edge. I'm going to use the ZModeler, and what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and close holes, and we have two different options, concave and convex. I actually just start doing the concave. It's going to give me some really weird, not so pretty geometry. It's more of like a tessellation weld. In fact, that concave pretty much does the exact same thing that if you go to geometry modified topology and then just hit close holes, which is it. There it is. I was so close. It's actually going to kind of do that same type of thing, which is so not so pretty. So instead, we're actually going to come in here, hover over an edge, and go to convex. And now you're going to get an N-gon, a giant one, but you can come in here, and now we can get something like this, which looks pretty cool. And then all we can do is Control W, give us a new poly group, or we can go to our PolyGroups and do our group by normals. But here, I'm actually going to keep it the same poly group, because then what I can do is, again, QMesh polygroup all, and give me a little bit of thickness, and then trap that into the threads as much as I need to. And this looks like this might need to be repositioned or a little bit taller. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this. So this is the fun part. We already have our lid, but this is going to be the internal. So I'm going to go ahead and Control-Shift-D, duplicate that. We'll hide it for now. And then from here, I'm just going to go ahead and maybe position it as much as I need to. So let's reset that, and then let's blow it up a little bit, actually. There we go. So that way it looks like it fits. And then we'll delete that copy because we made an adjustment. Control-Shift-D one more time to duplicate that. And now what we're looking at, of course, is our internal lid here with a little bit of a gap, like it would come off. Now that we duplicated that, what we're going to do is I'm just going to, again, Control-Shift-Tap and get this outer shell, because this is going to be a second part. So it needs to be it's a different type of plastic. So it's a different type of material. So we're going to keep it a separate geometry, delete hidden. And then you guessed it, just QMesh that a little bit more. And then boom, we have our little bit here. And that's how we ended up making the lid. And now this is where you can get really fancy, because what's cool is let's actually hover over edge here, insert, and let's just delete this edge. So one of the things that I did was, if we come back here, is I have like this kind of, it's not the right word for it, but like this kind of knurling that happens here, right? So we have this for like the grip and the functionality of it, and then a little bit of an aesthetic and beveling here. So the way I achieved that was actually coming over, and let's create two edges here. Now, a new feature with the ZModeler, by the way, is instead of just trying to guess where your single edge loop needs to be, you can actually step it now. So you can actually have this step up to 10 steps. So you can actually say like step 9, come over here. And then that's going to help us keep things relatively simple and even as much as possible, because it'll step to the 9th step. You can also pick half if you needed to at that point. But now that I have this, let's make sure this object is exactly in world center, just for the sake of what we're doing. Okay, that is. And the reason why is because we're actually going to go into our transform, and we're going to go into radial symmetry. So I like to work in world center with radial symmetry. It limits any type of issue that could happen. And one of the things we can do is I love pulling out random features, but with good purpose, is utilize stager. So this lid is exactly where I need it to be inside of my scene. Like it is ideally here. Although be it a giant lid, it is there nonetheless. So obviously I'm kind of rushing it, but you just take your time and size things accordingly. Here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to stager and doopy doop doop. Yep. You're a stager under geometry. I'm going to say home stage, and then I'm going to go ahead and send this here, and then I'm going to say target stage. And this lets me switch between those two stages. What's also really cool is, let's say I needed to resize it. So I'm going to send it home, boop, and I'm going to make it bigger. Target stage. Now when I switch, it's going to remember the scale too. So either way, this is actually really cool. So if you're working on tiny parts on, let's say, a character or on another scene like this, and then you're like, I just need to blow it up and make it bigger, you can use stager for that, even if that's just the one purpose, because then you can send it back to its original location, and then you're fine and you're working up the things symmetrically. So that's how you can do that. And now what we're going to do is, this is a 32 segment cylinder, because that's the default one for ZBrush. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead with, of course, the ZModeler selected, go to transform, activator symmetry. We're going to work on the y-axis here, and we're going to turn on radial symmetry so we can get all that. And we're going to go with 16, because that is going to be every other one as needed. And from here, we're just going to go ahead and press and hold the space bar, and we're going to do an inset here. And we're going to do polygroup all. And if we tap with holding Alt or Option, it's going to give us a temporary polygroup. And now we can inset just like this. There we go. Something like that. We can also do this a couple times. We can do an inset, and then we can do another inset if we need to. And something I like to do, it's just me being me, but I wanted these a little bit longer, and I try to find the shortest way to do stuff. So because dragging a mask over everything will mask off all of those edges as we needed, I'm actually going to just mask off this little section here and then invert that. And then I can just blow these up. Now, I made these a lot taller than the other lid, but this was the exact steps that I did. And then from here, you can just go ahead and we can go to QMesh, and we can start pulling these out just a little bit. There we go. Just something that's give us a little bit of thickness. And you can also, of course, come over here, inset, and we can repeat that process if we wanted to, just like that. And then you could do that even more. So what I would actually recommend, because I did that all in like multiple steps, is I'm going to drag this like this, get something like that, tap here, tap that again, so it's the same. Now I'm working on all these guys right here. I'll make these pretty skinny. There we go. Then we'll mask all these off like such and like such. Invert that. Boom, just like that. In fact, we can even go as crazy as something like this. Now, of course, we want to make sure that we're not masking off things that we don't want to be masking off. So this is where I would say too, we want to come in here with a polygroup selection and maybe like get different polygroups as much as possible. I'm going about this a little bit of an interesting way, but nonetheless, just to quickly showcase, you can also just come in here to polygroups on the edge loop. There you go. Really just end that quickly. There we go. Cool. So that way we can just focus on what we need to mask on. So I can actually come in here, hide this internal one like that, and then I can mask these off here. Say something like this, boom, and something like this, boom, right? Bring that all back, invert that. So now it should be fine. And then I can increase as needed. So, or we could just do this. Tap that. There we go. You get the idea. Yay. So once you have your knurling done, this is where I also want to noodle a ton. This is where I'm like take your time, make sure you guys are getting the exact look and feel that you want. That's super important, you know what I mean? But just take your time with it. And once you're done with that, then you can come in here, Q mesh it, boom, tap Alt, get a couple of looks that you want. Come in here to our polygroups, group by normals. And now this is where I'm going to say, come back here. We covered this earlier, but we went to Crease and we creased our PolyGroups. There we go. And we can do our edge here, say something like 4. And now if we need to divide, we can now start getting that little bit of there. So that's how I approached this knurling here, which is on, where do I have it? Where do I have it? Where's the project? Here it is. Oh, did I not load it? That's right. I restarted. Let me just load just to make sure. But yeah, that's how I actually approached this guy right here. Came through like that. And then of course you guys know you can just come through here on this lid part. And then I just went ahead and extruded that down. And it was easy enough. Now the last step I'll cover is how I merge things together. But before I do that, are there any questions before I continue?
Not on this. I've got one question I'm saving for the end. Oh, wait, we just have one come in. Spearchuck's wondering, what does knurling mean? And is that just the like ridged edge that you can grip onto?
Great question. So knurling is a machining process that actually cuts like kind of like a diamond shape, so to speak, into an object, which is usually it's mainly used for like grips and stuff. So it's a manufacturing term. For fun fact about Ian, I actually used to be in aerospace for over 12 years doing CNC lathe and mill work. And knurling it's basically just a process that cuts like a diamond shape into it and then gives its for grip and texture. That's not quite the proper term here because it's not diamond shaped, but it's the same idea. It's just adding the grip to it. Something for you as the user to grab and twist, because obviously our hands get oily or slick and plastic is slippery by nature. So it's there for like grip and function. So next time you're looking at like any type of bottle, like here's my glass cleaner, there's like a little bit of texture right in here that's meant for me to like grab and twist as needed. So I forget the proper term for that process that's straight up and down, but yeah, it's the same difference.
Nice.
Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and just going to use a subfolder to showcase these two objects here, not that, but welding these things together, pardon me. So welding these things together and making it one cohesive part. Like I had mentioned, we weren't going to be deforming or animating this project in any way. So for me, the important part to remember when modeling for Elly is that in Cinema 4D, it's not as like Cinema 4D and ZBrush. ZBrush is unique as it handles geometry really, really well. So we're talking millions upon millions of polygons, right? But Cinema is not going to necessarily like that. Like actually a lot of DCCs don't necessarily like dealing with millions of polygons. ZBrush is the unique king on this one. So I wanted to make sure that it is friendly enough for Elly to take, so that way I'm not frying her computer in the middle of the night and then she calls me and says, what the hell's wrong with you? So because of that, what I wanted to do was optimize this as much as possible, but still give her a little bit of topology to work with. This is low for what the process I want to do now. So I want to stitch these two things together. So in order to do that, I'm going to throw them both in a folder. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put it in a folder, say Yes, so Control and F folder, and we'll call this lid for the sake of argument. And let's go ahead and throw both things in that object. There we go. And then I'm going to, before I do anything else, I'm actually going to go ahead and bring up my ZModeler and just give me a few extra edge loops, just enough, because we're going to stitch this together. We're going to be welding these two things together. So I want to come in here, grab this edge. There we go, and add in a little bit of topology just so that the stitching can happen correctly, okay? And then from here, there's a couple ways you could do it. We could just merge this together. We don't have to Boolean them together whatsoever, but we can merge this together. And in doing so, that's not going to do the stitching action. That is just going to literally merge them together. So they're still separate objects. And the way you can tell that is if you go to PolyGroups and AutoGroups, if it gives an object a different color polygroup, even though they look like they're welded together, like that looks like that may be welded together, but it gave me a different polygroup for each object, that means that these are all independent objects and they're not welded, but they are merged, so they're combined. So what we want to do instead is let's give us a little bit of topology here, okay? And then we're going to grab this. Perfect. We're just making sure that we have it on both sides, which we do. Great. So the reason why we wanted that topology is because now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here, open up my gizmo, and the action we're going to perform is called Remesh by Union. Okay, so right now I'm going to click this, Remesh by Union, and this is actually going to perform little stitches all the way across. And this, by the way, makes this watertight. This little function is something that a lot of people who, like a lot of artists or toy makers who are into 3D printing a lot, actually use Remesh by Union, because what it's going to do is it's going to, if we turn on our double-sided geometry just to see internally, it's going to delete the internal mesh and weld everything together, very much like DynaMesh, except for in this case, I didn't lose any resolution whatsoever. It just stitched it as needed. But the reason why I added these little edge loops on the sides and on the bottom sides of the threads is because you see how it's like it's adding a bunch of triangles. It's trying its best to completely stitch and weld all of these together and then delete the inside. And so that's why it did that. And then from here, I actually went ahead and let's turn that off. I went ahead and just subdivided a few times. There we go. And that's the look and feel of it. So we can go ahead and delete lower. Now you can come in. I like to do some sort of like ZRemesh to give me a little bit cleaner topology. So I'm going to go ahead up the top here of my history and Control Tap right up here at the top. And that's going to remember that this is the state of the mesh quality. And from here, now I just want some cleaner topology. So I'm going to kick this up to like 20,000 actual points. So we're at about 48,000 points, so 20,000 should be fine. And I'm going to say adapt to size. Let's turn that down. We're going to keep our groups, but we're going to turn this down here. But before I hit ZRemesh, something to note is if I zoom all the way in here, right, there's a possibility that on this keep groups, that there's actually random green polygroups or something in places it may not be. You might have different color polygroups in areas that it's stitched kind of funky. So to clean this up, I'm actually just going to go Control W and make this one polygroup, but I want to take advantage of the smooth groups here. And so I'm going to go through, keep the wireframe on, and now we're going to say ZRemesh, and let's see what kind of topology we get. Boop, boop. All right, that's actually not too bad. Cool. So that's actually fairly clean. So I'm going to come through now, go to my subtool, project, and I'm going to project my history. And then I'm going to divide, project history, divide, project history, just so I have a little bit cleaner of a mesh. There we go. Yeah, something like that. And that's my internal. Now, this will never be seen. If it was going to be seen, I would definitely make sure that it is super clean as much as possible. But for this, it was more for just the effect that there was something that this lid was functional, because if Elly decided to twist the lid off and show it, even for just a second, that would be pretty good for what I would need. Awesome. So yeah, any questions? Pardon me.
So nothing from this last bit, but there was actually a question we had earlier, and I thought I'd save it until the end because it's quite it's an interesting question, and it was from 2 Pixels, wondering why we would perhaps model something like this that is, more hard surface inside of ZBrush as opposed to Cinema 4D. And I deliberately waited until the end because I feel like that question almost has been answered through all of the different techniques that you've shown. And I guess it's a lot of it is perhaps down to, you know, what you're familiar with, but I wondered what your take on that might be.
No, 100%. So here's one of the things that I love about the workflows that we're going to be representing. One is, for some reason, there's this misconception that ZBrush doesn't do hard surface. Now, what we are showing you in its base form is simple by nature, right? However, and Elly, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not a big Cinema 4D user, so to speak, but I'm fairly functional in it. Getting the shape of this gummy and stuff like that, I was able to achieve this in just a couple minutes really, really quickly. I'm sure you could do something very similar in Cinema, but because I'm comfortable in ZBrush, this was really a much easier approach for me. And when Elly and I were talking about it, and we were like, okay, well, what are all the things we want to do? When I told Elly, I think I can make this gummy in like 2 minutes, and she was like, bet, do it. Like, okay, great. Then that's one less thing I have to worry about. When you're working in a production pipeline, you have a bunch of skillful artists, and you want those artists to essentially work with their strengths instead of them trying to learn something new on the fly. If you're here learning for the first time and you may not be super proficient in hard surfaces ZBrush, this is perfect for you. If this is something that is absolutely like, yeah, I could have done this really quickly in Cinema, absolutely go for it. But the goal here is to showcase that ZBrush is very functional in doing things, and it does things in a unique way that speeds up artist workflow. And that is something that we dive into quite often. And also, it's a great way to showcase all the different ways you can approach a thing inside of ZBrush as a whole. Again, like I said in the beginning of this answering, there is this misconception that ZBrush is a new hard surface, but I have about 25 years worth of examples that I can link back on and say, look at all the artists doing hard surface things. So we like to dispel a lot of times with our tutorials and things that we can do. And we thought this would be a really great way of doing that. So I definitely encourage you to try new things, especially if you already have like a Max on One workflow. If you have ZBrush and you have Cinema, it works out well, that you can go ahead and give it a shot. It just depends on what it is you're looking for. What are your needs in the workflow, and what are you trying to achieve at the end of the day? That is really up to you. And that is actually something that we encourage too, is like, this isn't the only way to do this. You can do this in a few other ways. But with a project like this, we're going to do a lot more advanced projects that will really show off. Like, hence the question at the beginning of it is, do you guys want to see some jewelry stuff? Like, ZBrush is used in multiple industries. And for product and visualization, ZBrush is highly used for asset creation. One of its strengths is a guy like me sitting in the corner of a room all by himself, just cranking out assets left and right because of how fast I can do it. It's more about the speed and performance that we're kind of pushing for this demonstration of what ZBrush can do. And things like random logos and stuff like that, it's really easy for me to bring in a logo, use it as a mask, extract it, and keep it as a sculptural approach. But there's other workflows too, where you can have it as a displacement map, you can have it as a texture. All those things work. But here we're also trying to showcase what ZBrush is capable of in conjunction to the workflows that we're trying to answer. So hopefully that helps you.
No, I think that's a great answer. And the two kind of like takeaways from me is speed and performance. As someone who isn't very familiar with ZBrush, but is more familiar with Cinema 4D, those of you who have done sort of sculpting, trying to find and get a lot of detail out, involves subdividing a model to quite a dense mesh. You kind of do it just with like a click of the pen, really, and it doesn't impact or influence the speed of the software. Whereas I've had some situations where I've had to heavily subdivide just to get the amount of detail that I need when I'm sculpting, and that's when things start to lag. So it's not even, just the number of like polygons or anything. It's the physically making the thing and having the performance lag is a thing that I never really see in ZBrush. You could be like up-resing it endlessly and it still moves perfectly. You're able to sculpt things and there's no sort of lag at all in it. And I think that when we talk about, you know, things that frustrate us as artists, it's when things stop us from working and being creative. And yeah, I think that's kind of like the biggest thing. But like you said, whatever you're familiar with, we're just here to pretty much show what these tools can do together. Like next week when we talk about Redshift, people talk about Octane a lot to me, and that's great. Like we're here just to show really what the possibilities are, but the techniques that we're showing and the creativity behind it is really universal across sort of all and any applications, renderers, etc.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer too. I mean, it's like, yeah, again, we're showcasing the different ways that you can do something, and it's super cool. And Elly, you just touched on the fact too, like ZBrush's function is sculpting, is creating assets. Like that's its core purpose, is to sculpt, and we're really good at it. Like one of the best at it, actually. So because of that, yeah, we can handle millions and millions of topology. And also too, you guys saw how quickly I could just rant and make a quick bottle and stuff like that really, really effectively. So it's just, again, it's all about your workflow. It's all about your process. And that's what this, you know, what our jobs is do is to help expose a lot of these workflows. Even if they might seem simple on the surface, there's a lot of really cool techniques in it that you can repurpose and use. So yeah, and we love these questions too, by the way. It's a great take because, again, you know, at the end of the day, whatever works for you is the best process, and whatever you know, go for it. So have fun with it. I highly encourage it. A lot of ways too to think about is the ease of use in between softwares. So one of the functions that we have is called GoZ, and GoZ is now connected solely in, not solely, but is connected directly into Cinema. So what's cool is if I'm doing the workflow myself, so I don't have an Elly with me, and it's just me, and I want to send it to Redshift inside of Cinema, all I need to do is just literally come over here. So I have my assets, and this was the next step too, is exporting. So making it so it's low enough. And then from here with the GoZ, I can be like, you know, all the things that are visible, I'm going to click this and say, nope, don't show that. And it's going to look for a few things. That's fine. And just skip that for now. Boom, 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 boom. Cinema, yep, 2026. That's perfect. We're going to be sending this to Cinema. Boom, it's going to launch it. And what's really cool about this next process is the fact that like I can now kind of focus on having my render scene come into play. So once this loads up and then it's all set, then I have my render scene over there and I can focus on my rendering. But also, let's say, for example, I need to readjust or remanipulate something, and I know I sculpted it in ZBrush. I can actually send it back into ZBrush if I've made like actual changes to the model. I can send it back into ZBrush and then continue working on that asset and then send it back to Cinema. So little things like that you can absolutely do. Of course, we're live streaming right now, so yes, load. But that is something that you can absolutely do. So take advantage of that kind of handshake, because the one thing I don't like doing is exporting OBJ or FBX to re-import, to then realize something went wrong, to then go back, fix it, then come back, re-import. That process, I like to stay in one software as long as possible and then move it into the next step and go through that route. So that's also something as well.
Yeah, that's what we'll be talking about as well. This second phase in the process next Wednesday, when we look at, you know, some of the things that we can do inside of Cinema 4D. So we can take this asset and we can turn it into a scene. And my whole idea behind that is creating a very artist friendly session. So if you are, for example, if you are a ZBrush artist and you're not very familiar with rendering, the idea of nodes can be overwhelming. I mean, I was there when I learned Redshift 4 or 5 years ago. I thought, okay, I'm never really gonna get this. And so the plan is really to show you how we can take advantage of the assets that are in Cinema 4D and are in Redshift, and how we can just adapt those. And so that final render that we looked at the very beginning of this session is actually just using a bunch of pre-made assets in the content browser, or the asset library that we now call it, and just adapting them a little bit. So adding, our own graphics, adding some little procedural effects, and then adding some simple lighting. So very easily, if you are a ZBrush user and you're, unsure about using Cinema 4D and Redshift, this will hopefully be a little taster. And if you are the opposite, if you are someone who is more familiar with modeling inside of Cinema 4D, the idea behind this session today was to show you how, easy it can be to get into ZBrush as a project. And like Ian said, these techniques that you've learned, whilst they may be simple on this project, they can be adapted further for, these incredible people like Henry Chevenka, who models like an entire Bugatti model with hard surface modeling using, I'm sure, some of the very same techniques.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we're gonna do some really fun stuff. So we vote. Some people voted for seeing jewelry. So we're gonna do some really crazy stuff coming out soon. So we're gonna plan that, absolutely. So this is a great way to kind of like, we're gonna end the segment today, but just to really conclude, we're gonna start off with like, hey, this is a good workflow. Check this out. You can do that, and then we're gonna move into the more complicated stuff. So if you guys are ready for that, do not worry, because we're gonna come up with some live streams here soon. That's gonna really just like go even harder. So we thought we'll ease into 2026.
Ease into it's only January, guys. Fine.
We'll get in there. So do not worry. But this is great because I love this type of conversation. So thank you all for engaging and feeling so comfortable to ask these questions. And it's an important one too. So that's what we're here for. We're here to help as much as we can. So that all being said, are there any final questions regarding the stream, anything that happens that you guys want to have like a clarification on before we go?
I think I'm just keeping an eye on the chat. I think things are good for now. Just awesome show. We'll put that on there. Thanks, Spear Chuck. No, we appreciate it. We're so glad to be back doing these streams as well. Both me and Ian, we talk about this a lot, wanting to come and show off the things that our amazing tools can do, and more importantly, hear what you all as artists, designers, students want to know. So yeah, the more feedback you can share, whether it's on emails or we're both on socials, you can see our little things here and here. So feel free to let us know what you need our help with, and we can absolutely make sure we do more streams and more sessions covering all the fun techniques.
I have some jewelry ideas. I have some jeweler friends, so I'm gonna chat with them and we'll come up with some cool ideas. It'll be fun. I'm excited.
That sounds cool. I'm down for that.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. This has been super fun. I like taking the floor and just chatting for 30 minutes longer than I should. It's always great. So, but you all are great. Fantastic. I hope everybody's enjoying the new year. It's the last time I could technically say Happy New Year because January is almost over with. We're like 21 days in. So with that, enjoy the rest of your day. Next week, part 2, Elly's going to show why Redshift is awesome and teach me a few things because even I'm, I need to learn. I got to keep learning. So I'm excited for that. So please check that out. Put that on your notifications. If you're on YouTube, make sure once that goes up, hit that and all that good stuff. Like, subscribe, all the good stuff. You guys
all of the above.
Exactly. Notification bell, blah, 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 blah. We're going to turn into influencers before you guys know it, right before your eyes. You'll be like, these guys.
2026. You have the influencer.
All right. But with that being said, thank you guys again. Much love. Have fun. And we'll catch you next week. Same time, same channels, as there are 3 of them. And we'll talk to you guys later. Bye.